The only reason the alien Eliani race is not already the dominant force in the galaxy is because of the violent, savage, and shockingly effective resistance put up by technologically inferior humans during their attempt to conquer the Earth centuries ago. Dennis Hill, a solitary human explorer, could never have predicted the magnitude of what he would uncover when he ventured to the uncharted edges of the Milky Way in his custom-built spacecraft. As he exited FTL travel in a sector never before visited by humanity, his sensors immediately lit up, alerting him to the presence of an immense alien armada. Within seconds, sleek, silvery warships surrounded his vessel, bristling with advanced weaponry that made his ship's defenses seem laughably primitive in comparison. Tractor beams locked onto Dennis's craft, reeling him into the belly of the fleet's command ship. Heart pounding, he was escorted by insectoid guards to the bridge to face their leader, Admiral Boron of the Eliani Empire, a species legendary for their conquest of a quarter of the galaxy. But instead of threats or demands, Boron greeted Dennis with a shocking revelation. For hundreds of years, the Eliani have deliberately avoided Earth, considering it strictly off-limits. The reason? Long ago, the technologically superior Eliani had attempted to invade Earth, only to be met with such fierce, unyielding resistance from the primitive humans that they were forced to retreat. The human defenders demonstrated unrivaled determination and resourcefulness in the face of impossible odds. Despite vastly inferior weaponry, the humans had handed the Eliani a humiliating defeat in a bloody conflict spanning years, their indomitable will and clever tactics more than making up for their lack of advanced technology. The Eliani suffered staggering losses in the brutal ground war and devastating space battles, until continuing the costly invasion was deemed futile. Licking their wounds, the Eliani High Command made the decision to abandon their conquest and cordon off Earth's section of the galaxy, warning other spacefaring races that the planet was home to a deceptively formidable species best left alone. A shaky galactic peace has held since then, maintained by the Eliani's threatening to obliterate any civilization unwise enough to attack the humans and risk bringing their wrath down upon the galaxy once more. As Boron laid out this astonishing history, Dennis struggled to absorb the fact that his species had not only survived an attack by the galaxy's most fearsome empire, but actually emerged victorious. Part of him refused to believe humans could triumph against such odds, and he told Boron as much. With an amused glint in his compound eyes, the Admiral made Dennis an offer he couldn't refuse, a chance to visit a top-secret Eliani archive chronicling the ill-fated war against Earth. There, Dennis could see the proof of humanity's martial prowess with his own eyes. But Boron also delivered an ominous warning. Tensions were rising in the galaxy as rumors spread of the truth behind Earth's supposed quarantine. If the archive's secrets got out, every power-hungry species in the cosmos might decide to gamble on succeeding where the Eliani failed by launching a war to seize the human homeworld, or to eliminate the human threat once and for all before their strength could grow further. And if that happened, Dennis's people might find themselves standing alone against the assembled might of a legion of star-spanning civilizations. Faced with the potential for his mission to uncover truths that could spell doom for Earth, Dennis had no choice but to join Admiral Boron on a voyage to the closely guarded Eliani archive. As they embarked, he knew the stakes couldn't be higher. The fate of his species and the future of the galaxy itself might well rest on what they found when they arrived. As Dennis and Boron approached the towering obsidian structure housing the Eliani archives, a phalanx of heavily armed insectoid guards moved to block their path. Boron stepped forward, his multifaceted eyes flashing with authority. "Stand down," he commanded. "By order of Admiral Boron, this human is to be granted access to the archives." The guards chittered among themselves, clearly uneasy with the prospect of allowing a member of the once-conquered species into their most secure facility. After a tense moment, they parted ranks, allowing Dennis and Boron to pass. Inside, the archives were a labyrinth of gleaming metal corridors and vast chambers filled with alien technology and artifacts. Ancient manuscripts and data crystals lined the walls, containing the collective knowledge of the Eliani's eons-long reign over the stars. As they delved deeper, Dennis couldn't help but marvel at the scope of the archives. "This is incredible," he breathed. "The history of 1,000 worlds all in one place." Boron led him to a heavily fortified section marked with ominous glyphs. "The records of our wars with humanity," he explained. "Brace yourself, Dennis. The truth may be difficult to process." With a wave of his clawed hand, Boron deactivated the security barriers, and they stepped inside. The chamber was dimly lit, the air heavy with the weight of centuries. Holographic displays flickered to life, revealing scenes of unimaginable destruction and carnage. Dennis watched in horror as the archives played out the Eliani's repeated attempts to conquer Earth. Massive alien warships descending from the skies, only to be met with a hail of primitive but effective human weapons. Ground battles where human soldiers, outmatched in every way, fought with a ferocity that sent chills down his spine. And then, a revelation that shook him to his core. The Eliani's true motive for invading Earth. Therium, a rare and immensely powerful energy source hidden deep within the planet's core. A resource so valuable that it could shift the balance of power in the galaxy. "My God," Dennis whispered, "if the other races find out about this, it would mean war on a scale the galaxy has never seen." Boron finished grimly. "Earth would become the center of a conflict that could consume us all." Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the archives. Boron's communicator crackled to life. "Admiral, the Zorgons have breached our perimeter. They're heading for the archives." Dennis and Boron shared a look of unyielding commitment. They had to act fast, to gather what information they could and escape before the Zorgons could claim the secrets of Earth for themselves. Racing through the corridors, they downloaded as much data as possible, all the while fending off the archive's security drones that had now turned hostile. Laser blasts scorched the walls around them as they ducked and weaved, Dennis's human reflexes proving invaluable in the chaos. As they neared the exit, a group of Zorgon warriors burst into the room, their armor overflowing with advanced weaponry. Dennis and Boron dove for cover, trading fire with the invaders. The Eliani guards rallied to their defense, and soon the chamber was a maelstrom of searing energy beams and the cracking of exoskeletons. Dennis felt a strange sense of exhilaration as he fought alongside Boron, his human instincts guiding him as he wielded the unfamiliar alien weapons with surprising skill. Together, they pushed back the Zorgons, carving a path to Boron's waiting ship. But their victory was short-lived. As they blasted away from the archive, the true scale of the Zorgon force became apparent. A massive fleet hung in orbit, poised to descend upon the unsuspecting Earth. In the cockpit of Boron's ship, Dennis and the Admiral shared a moment of grim realization. They had uncovered a truth that could either save Earth or doom it, and now the fate of Dennis's homeworld hung in the balance. "We have to warn them," Dennis said, his voice thick with urgency. "We need to gather allies, find a way to protect the Therium." Boron nodded, his compound eyes glinting with newfound respect for the human beside him. "Then let us waste no time. Earth must be defended, and the galaxy must know the truth of humanity's strength." With a flare of engines, they set course for the distant blue world that now held the key to the galaxy's future, knowing that the road ahead would be fraught with danger at every turn. The starship's engines screamed as Boron pushed them to their limits, the vessel shuddering under the strain. Dennis gripped his seat, squeezing hard as a swarm of Zorgon warships filled the view screen behind them. "We can't outrun them," Dennis said, his voice tight. "There's too many." Boron's compound eyes flickered across the ship's readouts. "Agreed. We need to find cover. There. An asteroid field." The ship banked hard, diving into a dense cluster of tumbling space rocks. Massive chunks of stone and metal whizzed past on all sides as Boron deftly wove through the chaos. The Zorgon fleet hesitated at the field's edge before plunging in after them. Let's see how they like navigating this mess," Dennis said with grim satisfaction. As they huddled behind a particularly large asteroid, the ship's comms crackled to life with a burst of static. Dennis leaned forward, frowning as he tried to decipher the garbled message. Tarium, Earth, rendezvous. Can you clean that up? Dennis asked. Boron's fingers flew over the controls. Working on it, there. I've isolated the signal. A distorted voice came through. To those who seek the truth about Tarium, come to these coordinates on Earth. All will be revealed. Dennis and Boron exchanged looks. It could be a trap, Dennis said. Perhaps, but it may be our only lead, Boron replied. We need allies if we're to have any hope against the Zorgons. A plan formed. Working quickly, they attached small fusion devices to several nearby asteroids. With precise calculations, they launched the rigged rocks towards the approaching Zorgon fleet. Now we wait, Dennis said, tension evident in his voice. Moments later, a series of massive explosions lit up space. Zorgon ships spiraled out of control, smashing into other asteroids or each other in a chain reaction of destruction. Go! Dennis shouted. Boron gunned the engines, their ship streaking away from the chaos. They didn't stop until Earth's blue sphere filled their view. As they approached, alarms blared. A squadron of human fighters surrounded them, weapons locked on. Unidentified vessel, you are in restricted space. State your purpose or be destroyed, a stern voice demanded over the comms. Dennis grabbed the mic. This is Dennis Hill, human explorer. I have critical information about an impending alien invasion. We need to speak with your leaders immediately. There was a long pause before the voice returned. Transmitting coordinates for landing. You will be escorted by Commander Jameson. Any deviation will be met with lethal force. They landed at a nondescript airfield, surrounded by armed soldiers. A stern-faced man in a crisp uniform approached, Admiral Jameson. His eyes narrowed at the sight of Boron. You better have a damn good explanation for bringing an alien to Earth, son, Jameson growled. Dennis quickly outlined their discoveries and the Zorgon threat. Jameson's expression grew darker with each word. Follow me, he said gruffly, and keep your friend close. They were led to an underground bunker filled with scientists and military personnel. A balding man in a lab coat stepped forward. I'm Dr. Emerson. We've been expecting you, he said, his tone grave. What you've uncovered about Tarium is only the beginning. Over the next hour, Dennis and Boron learned the full truth. Earth had known about Tarium since the Eliani invasion centuries ago. A secret program had been developing weapons and shields using its power ever since. It's not just an energy source, Dr. Emerson explained. Tarium can alter the very fabric of space-time. The potential applications are... He was cut off as alarms began blaring throughout the facility. A soldier burst in, face pale. Sir, we've detected multiple breaches. It's the Zorgons. They're inside the perimeter. The room erupted into chaos. Dennis and Boron found themselves thrust into the heart of a desperate battle. Laser fire and explosions echoed through the corridors as they fought alongside the human defenders. We can't let them get the Tarium tech, Dennis shouted over the din. They pushed forward, Boron's alien strength and Dennis's quick thinking proving a formidable combination. But the Zorgons kept coming, led by a towering figure Dennis assumed must be Commander Zaxxon. Suddenly, Admiral Jameson's voice cut through the comms. Massive Zorgon fleet incoming. ETA 30 minutes. Dr. Emerson appeared, clutching a strange device. This prototype harnesses Tarium energy. It may be our only hope. We need to evacuate now. Dennis, Boron, and a handful of survivors fought their way to a waiting transport. As they lifted off, Dennis caught a final glimpse of the facility erupting in flames. Where to now? Boron asked as Earth grew small behind them. Dennis gripped the Tarium device. We find allies, fast. The real war is just beginning. The transport shuddered as it touched down on the tarmac of a hidden military base. Dennis stumbled out, his legs wobbly after the harrowing escape. Boron followed close behind, his alien frame hunched with exhaustion. Admiral Jameson strode up, his face grim. We've got trouble. Big trouble. He led them to a bustling command center. Screens flickered with images of Earth from orbit, and the massive Zorgon fleet descending upon it. They're hitting us everywhere, Jameson said, gesturing to red dots spreading across a global map. We're outgunned and outnumbered. Dennis clenched his fists. There has to be something we can do. Boron's multifaceted eyes glinted. Perhaps there is. The Therium device we recovered. It could disrupt their fleet's command structure. A plan quickly took shape. Dennis would lead a strike team to infiltrate the Zorgon flagship. Boron provided a contingent of Eliani warriors to bolster their numbers. Hours later, Dennis found himself crammed into a stolen Zorgon prisoner transport with 24 human and Eliani soldiers. His heart pounded as they approached the looming bulk of the Zorgon command ship. Remember, he whispered, once we're aboard, my team takes the bridge. Boron, you plant the device in engineering. The plan worked, at first. Disguised as prisoners, they made it past the initial security checkpoints. Then all hell broke loose. Alarms blared as Dennis and his team fought their way to the bridge. Zorgon guards fell before their assault, but not without cost. By the time they breached the command center, half of Dennis's squad was down. Dennis tackled the Zorgon commander, wrestling him to the ground as the rest of his team secured the room. It's over, Dennis growled. Call off the attack. Meanwhile, Boron's team encountered heavy resistance on their way to engineering. Plasma bolts sizzled past as they dove from cover to cover. 3 Eliani warriors fell before they reached the engine room. Boron's claws flew over the Therium device, priming it for activation. Just as the final sequence initiated, the doors blew inward. Commander Zaxxon himself stormed in, flanked by elite guards. For Earth! Boron roared, throwing himself at the Zorgon leader. His team opened fire, buying precious seconds as the device powered up. On the bridge, Dennis watched in awe as the Therium energy surged through the ship's systems. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks. The deck lurched beneath his feet. We have to go, now! Dennis shouted, dragging the Zorgon commander with him as they fled. They barely made it to the escape pods as the flagship began to tear itself apart. All around them, the Zorgon fleet fell into disarray, their coordinated assault crumbling without central command. Earth's defenders seized the moment. Fighters and warships swarmed from hidden bases, striking at the confused alien armada. Dennis's pod touched down amidst the chaos of battle. He stumbled out, searching frantically for Boron's team. His heart sank as he saw the battered Eliani warriors approaching, bearing their leader's broken body. Dennis! Boron wheezed, his voice barely audible. Listen carefully. The Zorgons. They're just the beginning. A greater threat. An alliance of empires. They want the Therium. You must find our allies. Stop them. With trembling hands, Boron pressed a data crystal into Dennis's palm. The answers. All here. Find them, Dennis. Save Earth. Boron's eyes dimmed, his final breath rattling in his chest. Dennis bowed his head, grief and commitment warring within him. I will, he whispered. I promise. As the battle raged around them, Dennis clutched the crystal tightly. The real war, he knew, was just beginning. Dennis clutched the data crystal, his fingers tracing its facets as he stared out the viewport at the vast expanse of space. The stolen Zorgon ship hummed beneath his feet, carrying him and a ragtag group of human and Eliani survivors towards an uncertain future. Approaching the coordinates, announced Captain Thorne, her voice taut with tension. As they neared their destination, a massive structure materialized before them, a sprawling space station carved into the side of an asteroid. Its surface bristled with weapon emplacements and sensor arrays. Unidentified vessel, state your purpose, crackled a gruff voice over the comms. Dennis leaned forward. We carry a message from Boron. The crystal calls us here. A long pause followed. Then, Docking Bay 3. Any hostile action will result in immediate termination. The ship glided into a cavernous hangar. As the airlock cycled, Dennis led his team out, hands raised. They found themselves surrounded by a diverse array of alien species, all aiming weapons at them. A towering figure pushed through the crowd. His skin was mottled gray, crisscrossed with scars. 4 arms hung at his sides, each ending in wickedly sharp claws. I am Crixon, he rumbled. You claim to know boron? Dennis stepped forward, holding out the crystal. He gave me this before he died. Said we'd find allies here. Crixon's eyes narrowed as he examined the crystal. After a moment, he nodded to his troops. Stand down. It seems we have much to discuss. They followed Crixon through winding corridors to a command center humming with activity. Holographic displays showed star systems and fleet movements. Welcome to the last bastion of hope against the Alliance, Crixon said, gesturing around them. We are what remains of countless civilizations they've conquered or destroyed. Over the next few hours, Crixon laid out the dire situation facing the galaxy. The Alliance's hunger for power knew no bounds, and Earth's Therium was the key to their plans for total domination. Boron infiltrated their ranks, Crixon explained. He uncovered their ultimate goal, to combine Therium with a substance called Xenon Prime. The destructive potential is unimaginable. Dennis felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. So what's our next move? Crixon's scarred face twisted into a grim smile. We train, we prepare, and when the time comes, we strike. The following weeks were a blur of intense preparation. Dennis and his team drilled relentlessly, learning to operate advanced weaponry and pilot alien craft. The technology was far beyond anything they'd encountered before. During a rare moment of respite, Dennis found himself in a simulator, practicing maneuvers in a sleek fighter. The neural interface linked directly to his mind, the ship responding to his thoughts with terrifying speed. You're a natural, came a voice from behind him. Dennis turned to see Crixon watching him with approval. But raw talent isn't enough. The Alliance is mobilizing for a full assault on Earth. We intercepted these transmissions an hour ago. Crixon activated a nearby holo projector. It showed a massive armada assembling, thousands of ships strong. Dennis felt his stomach drop. There might be a way to stop them, Crixon said, his voice low. We've acquired plans for a weapon capable of crippling their fleet. But we're missing a crucial component, a mineral found only on your moon. Dennis nodded, understanding dawning. When do we leave? The mission to Earth's moon was a nightmare from the start. Their stealth ship barely evaded the Alliance's outer perimeter, only to find the lunar surface crawling with enemy forces. They were already strip mining the precious ore. We go in hot, Dennis ordered, gripping the controls of his fighter. Hit them hard, grab what we need and get out. The ensuing battle was chaos. Alliance ships swarmed them the moment they broke atmosphere. Dennis's fighter screamed across the lunar surface, weaving between laser blasts and missile contrails. He spotted the mining operation and dove, strafing the area with plasma fire. Behind him, the rest of the strike team touched down, fighting their way to the stockpiles of refined ore. We've got it! Shouted Corporal Chen over the comms. Fall back to the ship! As Dennis provided covering fire, he saw Chen stumble, hit by enemy fire. Without thinking, Dennis ejected from his fighter, using the low gravity to bound across the battlefield. He reached Chen just as an Alliance soldier leveled a weapon at the fallen man. Dennis tackled the alien, the two of them tumbling across the lunar regolith. They grappled desperately, neither able to bring a weapon to bear. Dennis felt his helmet crack as the alien slammed his head into the ground. A burst of gunfire erupted and the alien went limp. Dennis looked up to see Crixon standing over him, smoke curling from his weapon. Let's move! Crixon roared. They barely made it back to the ship, casualties mounting with each passing second. As they rocketed away from the moon, Dennis looked around the crowded hold. So many empty seats, so many lives lost. But clutched in Chen's arms was a container of the precious ore. It had cost them dearly, but they had what they needed. Back at the Resistance base, work began immediately on the weapon that might turn the tide of the war. Dennis watched as alien scientists and engineers labored day and night, combining the lunar mineral with their stockpile of Xenon Prime. A massive view screen dominated one wall of the command center, showing the relentless advance of the Alliance fleet. Earth grew larger by the hour. Dennis clenched his fists, exhaustion and willpower warring within him. The real battle was about to begin, and the fate of his home, of the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. The acrid stench of burning circuitry filled the air as Dennis and Crixon stood before the half-assembled superweapon. Sparks erupted from exposed wiring as Eleni technicians worked feverishly to integrate the therium ore into the weapon's core. "We're running out of time," Dennis said, his voice tight with urgency. Crixon's forearms moved in a blur, manipulating holographic schematics. "The integration process is delicate. Rush it, and we risk catastrophic failure." A young human officer burst into the room, her face pale. "Intercepted transmission, sir. The Alliance fleet. They're almost here." Dennis's stomach clenched as he studied the tactical display. Countless enemy ships swarmed toward Earth, their numbers defying comprehension. "We can't wait," he declared, turning to Crixon. "We have to strike now before they're in position." The alien commander's eyes narrowed. "The weapon isn't ready. This is suicide." "It's our only chance," Dennis argued. "If we can take out their flagship, we might just buy Earth the time it needs." After a tense moment, Crixon nodded. "Very well, I'll assemble a strike team." Hours later, Dennis found himself aboard a battered resistance vessel, surrounded by a motley crew of humans and aliens. Among them sat a Boron warrior, his wounds barely healed, eyes burning with the need for vengeance. As they neared the outer edges of Alliance territory, the enormity of their task became clear. Swarms of enemy ships filled the view screen, ranging from nimble fighters to city-sized dreadnoughts. "How are we supposed to get through that?" muttered Corporal Chen, her voice tinged with awe and fear. Dennis gripped the arms of his chair. "We find a gap and we punch through. All that matters is reaching the flagship." Their ship shuddered as it engaged its stealth systems. They weaved through the Alliance armada, each near miss sending pulses of adrenaline through Dennis's veins. Finally, the massive bulk of the enemy flagship loomed before them. Dennis led the boarding party to the airlock, his pulse pounding in his ears. "Remember," he said, checking his weapon, "we move fast and we hit hard. Every second counts." The airlock hissed open, and chaos erupted. Alliance soldiers fell before their initial assault, caught off guard by the audacious attack. But reinforcements poured in, filling the corridors with plasma fire and alien war cries. Dennis ducked behind a fallen bulkhead, the heat of enemy fire singeing his hair. He popped up, squeezing off precise shots that dropped two insectoid warriors. "Push forward," he shouted over the din of battle. "We need to reach the reactor core." They fought their way deeper into the ship, facing creatures that defied description. A tentacled monstrosity lashed out, nearly decapitating Chen before the Boron warrior incinerated it with a burst from his energy rifle. As Dennis's team secured a command node, disabling ship-wide alarms, the second group peeled off toward the reactor. He watched them go, knowing the fate of Earth rested on their success. Suddenly, a familiar voice crackled over the ship's speakers. "So, the heroes return for another beating." Dennis's blood ran cold. "Zaxxon!" he snarled. The corridors filled with elite Alliance troops, backing Dennis's team into a defensive position. They traded fire desperately, but they were vastly outnumbered. Just as hope began to fade, a deafening explosion rocked the ship. Klaxons blared as emergency lighting bathed everything in an eerie red glow. "They did it," Dennis breathed. "They armed the weapon." The Boron warrior stood, energy crackling around him. "Go!" he roared. "I'll hold them off." Dennis hesitated, but the warrior's eyes brooked no argument. With a final nod of respect, Dennis led the survivors in a mad dash for their shuttle. They barely made it, the hatch sealing behind them as the flagship began to tear itself apart. Through the view screen, Dennis watched in awe as a chain reaction rippled through the Alliance fleet. Ships collided, their formation disintegrating into chaos. As they sped away from the devastation, Dennis slumped in his chair, exhaustion washing over him. They'd struck a decisive blow, but at a terrible cost, and he knew, deep in his bones, that this was only the beginning. The real war, the war for the very future of the galaxy, still lay ahead. The acrid smell of plasma discharge hung in the air as Dennis slumped against a bulkhead, his chest heaving. Around him, the Resistance strike team caught their breath, the sounds of distant explosions echoing through the Nexus's vast corridors. "Status report," Dennis barked, his eyes scanning the battered faces of his comrades. Chen, her armor scorched and dented, looked up from a holographic display. "We've reached the outer perimeter of the command hub, but Alliance forces are massing for a counterattack. Our diversionary teams are reporting heavy resistance across all sectors." Dennis nodded, his mind racing. They'd come too far to fail now. He turned to Krazak, an Eliani warrior whose iridescent scales were stained with Alliance blood. "How long can you hold this position?" The alien's multifaceted eyes gleamed. "Long enough. Go, finish this." With a sharp nod, Dennis motioned to Chen and two other operatives. They sprinted down a twisting corridor, the sounds of battle growing louder with each step. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with a squad of Alliance elites. Time seemed to slow. Dennis dove for cover as energy bolts sizzled past, close enough to singe his hair. He rolled, coming up firing. His shots found their mark, dropping two Alliance soldiers in rapid succession. Chen let out a war cry, hurling a plasma grenade into the midst of the enemy formation. The explosion sent Alliance troops flying, their screams cut short by the deafening blast. "Move," Dennis shouted, leading the charge through the smoke and debris. They fought their way deeper into the heart of the Nexus, each step bringing them closer to their objective. The Resistance operatives moved with ruthless efficiency, their months of training paying off in this crucible of combat. Finally, they reached the sealed doors of the command hub. Dennis pulled out a compact device, attaching it to the security panel. Lines of alien code scrolled across its screen as it worked to bypass the lockdown protocols. "Incoming!" Chen yelled, laying down suppressing fire as Alliance reinforcements swarmed into the corridor. Dennis gritted his teeth, willing the hacking device to work faster. A stray shot grazed his arm, sending a jolt of pain through his body. He ignored it, focused solely on the task at hand. With a hiss, the massive doors began to slide open. Dennis and his team surged forward, entering the cavernous command center. Holographic displays filled the air, showing the chaos unfolding across the Nexus system. Alliance officers scrambled for weapons, caught off guard by the sudden intrusion. Dennis didn't hesitate. He sprinted for the central console, dodging energy blasts and leaping over fallen debris. Time seemed to stretch as Dennis reached the main terminal. His fingers flew across the alien interface, inputting the complex virus code that would bring down the Nexus's defenses. Alarms blared, the air thick with the smell of ozone and fear. "Dennis, hurry!" Chen shouted, her voice strained as she held off a wave of Alliance guards. With a final keystroke, Dennis activated the virus. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, the command center erupted into chaos. Screens flickered and died. Power systems fluctuated wildly. Through the massive viewports, Dennis watched in awe as the Nexus's shimmering defensive shields winked out of existence. In the distance, he could see the Resistance fleet emerging from hyperspace, weapons blazing. The battle for the heart of Alliance territory had begun in earnest. Dennis turned to his team, his eyes blazing with fierce drive. "Now we hold this position, whatever it takes." As if in response, the doors to the command hub burst open, disgorging waves of Alliance troops. Dennis and his comrades took up defensive positions, their weapons at the ready. The future of the cosmos hung in the balance, and they were the linchpin upon which everything rested. The command hub shook violently as another volley of Resistance fire struck the Nexus. Dennis ducked behind a fallen console, plasma bolts sizzling past his head. He glanced at Chen, her face streaked with soot and sweat. "We can't hold this position much longer," she shouted over the din of battle. Dennis nodded grimly, his eyes darting to the tactical display. A plan formed in his mind as he studied the schematics of the massive structure. "There!" He pointed to a network of maintenance tunnels snaking beneath their feet. "If we can reach those conduits, we might have a shot at the hangar bay." Chen's eyes widened. "That's suicide, Dennis. We'd be sitting ducks down there. Got a better idea? Dennis retorted, firing off a burst that dropped an advancing Alliance trooper. With no time for debate, Dennis rallied his battered team. They fought their way through the lower levels, each step a brutal struggle. In a narrow corridor, they encountered a squad of Alliance security forces. The air filled with the acrid smell of ozone as energy weapons discharged in the confined space. Dennis felt the searing heat of a near miss on his cheek as he dove for cover. He returned fire, his shots finding their mark in the chest of an insectoid warrior. Beside him, an Eliani resistance fighter fell, a smoking hole in her torso. They pressed on, leaving their fallen comrade behind. The maintenance tunnels loomed ahead, a dark maw promising either salvation or doom. As they entered the cramped passageways, Dennis's comlink crackled to life. Crixon's voice came through, strained and urgent. Dennis, we've secured a foothold on the outer moon, but we're getting hammered. Alliance reinforcements are swarming our position. We need air support now. Dennis cursed under his breath. Copy that. We're en route to the hangar bay. Hold on, Crixon. They emerged from the tunnels into a cavernous hangar, and Dennis's heart sank. Scores of Alliance troops swarmed the area, preparing for a counterattack. Scatter, Dennis ordered. Create as much chaos as you can. I'm going for that shuttle. His team fanned out, unleashing a barrage of fire that sent Alliance soldiers diving for cover. Dennis sprinted across the hangar floor, energy bolts scorching the deck around him. He reached the shuttle, his fingers flying over the control panel. As the engines roared to life, a massive shape appeared in the hangar mouth. An Alliance dreadnought, its weapons already unleashing devastation on the resistance forces below. Dennis gritted his teeth, a crazy plan forming. He gunned the shuttle's engines, rocketing out of the hangar. The dreadnought loomed before him, a city-sized monstrous of destruction. He weaved through a hail of defensive fire, alarms blaring as the shuttle's systems registered multiple hits. The bridge tower of the dreadnought grew larger in his viewport. Sorry about this, Dennis muttered, diverting all power to the forward shields. The impact was tremendous. Dennis felt his bones rattle as the shuttle tore through the dreadnought's armor plating. Alarms screamed, and emergency lights bathed the cockpit in an eerie red glow. With seconds to spare, Dennis punched the eject button. His seat blasted free of the disintegrating shuttle, hurling him into the void of space. He tumbled end over end, chunks of debris narrowly missing him. Through his faceplate, Dennis watched the crippled dreadnought list to one side, its primary systems failing. A resistance dropship swooped in, snagging him with a tractor beam. Moments later, Dennis stumbled onto the deck of a resistance capital ship. Crixon stood there, his alien features set in an expression of relief and concern. By the gods, Dennis, Crixon said, steadying him. I thought we'd lost you. Before Dennis could respond, a nearby communications officer called out. Sirs, we're picking up a transmission. It's the Imperator. The mood on the bridge shifted instantly. They gathered around the holo display, watching as the enigmatic leader of the Alliance issued his call to arms. Dennis turned to Crixon, his eyes blazing with fierce intensity. We need to end this. Now, before that armada arrives. Crixon nodded solemnly. Agreed. But the Imperator's citadel is hidden somewhere in this labyrinth. How do we find it? Dennis's mind raced, considering and discarding plans. We'll find a way. We have to. Everything we've fought for comes down to this. As they began to formulate their desperate strategy, Dennis looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the fate of Earth, the Terrium, and countless other worlds hung in the balance. The real battle was about to begin. Dennis and Crixon huddled over a holographic display, their faces illuminated by the flickering blue light. Around them, a diverse group of resistance fighters stood at attention, their eyes fixed on the two leaders. The Imperator's citadel, Dennis said, pointing to a massive structure floating in the void. Our final target. Crixon nodded, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the hologram. We've assembled the best of the best. Eliani warriors, human commandos, and specialists from a dozen worlds. An Eliani warrior stepped forward, her iridescent scales gleaming under the harsh lights. "For Boron!" she hissed, her voice filled with barely contained rage. Dennis met her gaze, seeing the fire of vengeance burning within. "For all those we've lost," he agreed. The plan was audacious, bordering on suicidal. As Dennis outlined the details, he saw a mix of dedication and fear on the faces around him. They would hijack an Alliance supply convoy, using it as a Trojan horse to penetrate the Citadel's defenses. Hours later, Dennis found himself crouched in the cargo hold of a stealth shuttle, surrounded by his strike team. The shuttle's engines hummed softly as they approached the convoy's pre-plotted course through a dense asteroid field. 30 seconds to intercept, the pilot's voice crackled over the comm. Dennis checked his weapon one last time, his heart pounding in his chest. "Remember," he said to his team, "we take the bridge quickly and quietly. No alarms." The shuttle shuddered as it latched onto the hull of the lead cargo hauler. With a hiss of equalizing pressure, the airlock opened. Dennis was the first through, his boots magnetizing to the deck as he entered 0G. They moved swiftly through the ship's corridors, encountering minimal resistance. Most of the crew were civilian contractors, easily subdued. When they reached the bridge, Dennis used a captured keycard to override the door. The Alliance captain barely had time to turn in his chair before Dennis's stun blast caught him in the chest. Within moments, the bridge was secured. "Helm, maintain course and speed," Dennis ordered one of his team members. "Comms, prepare to transmit the clearance codes we acquired." As they approached the Citadel, Dennis felt his pulse quicken. The massive structure loomed before them, jam-packed with weapon emplacements and sensor arrays. A tense silence fell over the bridge as they waited for the challenge from Citadel Control. "Convoy Alpha 79er, transmit authorization," a board voice finally crackled over the comm. Dennis nodded to his communications officer, who sent the captured codes. Seconds stretched into an eternity as they waited for a response. "Convoy Alpha 79er, you are cleared for Docking Bay 4. Welcome to Imperator's Fist." A collective sigh of relief swept through the bridge. They had passed the first hurdle, but the real challenge lay ahead. As they approached the docking bay, Dennis gathered his strike force. "Remember the plan," he said, his voice low and intense. "Team 1 with me to locate the command center. Team 2 with Crixon to sabotage the defenses. Move fast, stay quiet, and may whatever gods you believe in watch over us all." The cargo hauler's massive doors opened with a pneumatic hiss. Dennis led his team out, their Alliance disguises allowing them to blend in with the bustle of the docking bay. They moved purposefully, as if they belonged there, heading for the nearest access corridor. Once inside the Citadel proper, Dennis tapped a command into his wrist computer. A three-dimensional map of the structure appeared, highlighting their target and the most direct route. "This way," he whispered, leading his team deeper into the heart of the enemy stronghold. They encountered their first real resistance at a security checkpoint. 2 Alliance guards stood watch, their energy rifles at the ready. Dennis approached confidently, flashing a forged ID. "Maintenance crew," he said gruffly. "We've got reports of power fluctuations in Sector 7. The guard frowned, checking his datapad. "I don't see any—" He never finished the sentence. Dennis's team moved with lightning speed, stunning both guards before they could raise the alarm. They dragged the unconscious bodies into a nearby storage closet and continued on. As they moved deeper into the Citadel, the sounds of battle began to echo through the corridors. Crixon's team had engaged the enemy, drawing attention away from Dennis's approach to the command center. They rounded a corner and found themselves face to face with a squad of elite Alliance troops. There was a moment of shocked silence, then all hell broke loose. Energy bolts filled the air as both sides dove for cover. Dennis rolled behind a support pillar, the smell of ozone filling his nostrils as a blast scorched the wall where his head had been moments before. He popped out of cover, squeezing off 3 rapid shots. An Alliance soldier fell, a smoking hole in his chest. The firefight intensified, the narrow corridor becoming a kill zone. One of Dennis's team, a grizzled veteran named Jax, took a hit to the shoulder. He stumbled, exposing himself to enemy fire, Without hesitation, Dennis launched himself across the corridor, tackling Jax to safety. "Thanks, boss," Jax grunted, his face pale with pain. Dennis nodded, then turned to the rest of his team. "Push forward. We can't let them bog us down here." They advanced relentlessly, fighting their way through waves of Alliance defenders. The air filled with the acrid smell of smoke and the cries of the wounded. Finally, they reached the massive doors of the command center. Dennis planted explosive charges while his team provided covering fire. "Fire in the hole," he shouted, triggering the detonator. The explosion rocked the citadel, blowing the reinforced doors off their hinges. Dennis charged through the smoke, his weapon at the ready. The command center was a hive of activity, Alliance officers scrambling to respond to the attack. At the center of it all stood a figure that could only be the Imperator. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, the Imperator was a terrifying sight. His body was a patchwork of different alien physiologies, each chosen for its strength or combat prowess. Eyes that glowed with an unnatural intelligence fixed on Dennis. "So," the Imperator's voice boomed, "the architects of this pitiful rebellion have finally shown themselves." Dennis raised his weapon, but faster than he could track, the Imperator moved. A massive hand closed around Dennis's throat, lifting him off the ground. "Did you really think you could challenge the might of the Alliance?" The Imperator sneered. "Your Tarium, your tactics, your bravery, they mean nothing in the face of true power." Dennis struggled, his vision beginning to darken. He could hear the sounds of combat around him as his team engaged the Praetorian Guard, but it seemed distant, unreal. Just as consciousness began to slip away, a familiar voice cut through the chaos. "Dennis, catch!" Crixon's battered form appeared in the doorway. With the last of his strength, he hurled a small device across the room. Dennis's hand shot out, snatching it from the air. He recognized it instantly, the Xenon Prime device, their last bold strategy. As the Imperator's grip tightened, Dennis activated the device. A blinding light filled the room, accompanied by a roar that seemed to shake the very fabric of reality. Dennis felt the Imperator's grip loosen as the energy washed over them both. He fell to the ground, gasping for air. Through watering eyes, he saw the Imperator's form begin to disintegrate, consumed by the raw power of the Xenon Prime energy. The being that had terrorized the galaxy for so long let out a final, agonized scream before vanishing completely. The blast expanded outward, tearing through the Citadel's systems. Alarms blared as the structure began to shake itself apart. Dennis staggered to his feet, his body aching from the ordeal. "We need to move," he shouted to his surviving team members. "This whole place is coming down." They ran through collapsing corridors, dodging falling debris and fleeing Alliance soldiers. Dennis's lungs burned as he pushed himself to the limit, the memory of Crixon's sacrifice driving him forward. They reached the hangar bay just as the Citadel's artificial gravity began to fail. Dennis leapt into the cockpit of a small Alliance shuttle, his team piling in behind him. As they blasted out of the disintegrating structure, Dennis caught sight of the battle raging outside. The Resistance fleet had arrived in force, capitalizing on the chaos caused by the Citadel's destruction. Alliance ships, suddenly without central command, fell into disarray. Some continued to fight, while others began to flee or surrender. Dennis guided their stolen shuttle through the melee, watching as the mighty Citadel, the seat of Alliance power, broke apart and exploded in a spectacular display of light and debris. As they rendezvoused with the Resistance flagship, Dennis felt a complex mix of emotions wash over him. They had won, but at a terrible cost. And as he looked out at the stars, he knew that their struggles were just getting started. The taste of victory turned bitter in Dennis's mouth as he stood on the bridge of the Resistance flagship, staring at the holographic display before him. Red markers flashed across the outer systems, each representing another outpost gone dark. "What are we dealing with?" Dennis asked, his voice tight with tension. A grizzled intelligence officer stepped forward, her face etched with worry. "We're calling them the Harbingers, sir. Our long-range scanners can barely detect them. They're unlike anything we've ever seen." Dennis leaned in, studying the flickering data streams. "Show me." The officer tapped a series of commands, and a grainy image materialized. Dennis's eyes widened as he took in the otherworldly ship, sleek, almost organic in design, with a hull that seemed to bend light around it. "How are they evading our sensors?" Dennis demanded. "Advanced cloaking technology, we think. Our best guess is they're manipulating space-time itself to stay hidden." Dennis's fists clenched at his sides. They had barely caught their breath from overthrowing the Imperator, and now this. He turned to his assembled team. "We need eyes on the ground, now." Hours later, Dennis found himself crouched in the cargo hold of a stealth shuttle once again, this time accompanied by a small team of elite operatives. The ship shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace near a remote outpost that had fallen silent. "Remember," Dennis said, his voice low and urgent, "we're here to gather intel. No unnecessary risks." They breached the outpost's airlock, weapons at the ready. The eerie silence sent chills down Dennis's spine. Emergency lights flickered weakly, casting long shadows in the empty corridors. As they moved deeper into the facility, Dennis's boot crunched on something. He looked down, his blood running cold. A pile of ash, roughly human-shaped, lay scattered on the floor. "What the hell?" one of his team whispered. They found similar scenes throughout the outpost. No bodies, no signs of struggle, just piles of ash and perfectly circular holes cut through bulkheads and equipment. In the control room, Dennis accessed a still-functioning computer terminal. His fingers flew over the keys as he downloaded every scrap of data he could find. "Sir," a team member called out, "you need to see this." Dennis hurried over to a viewport, his breath catching in his throat. A massive ship, easily dwarfing anything in their fleet, hung in space nearby. Its surface rippled and shifted, as if it were made of liquid metal. "We need to go," Dennis said, "now." They barely made it back to their shuttle before the Harbinger ship noticed their presence. As they rocketed away from the outpost, Dennis watched in horror as a beam of sickly green energy lanced out, completely disintegrating the entire station in seconds. Back on the Resistance flagship, Dennis pored over the recovered data with his top scientists. The conclusions they reached chilled him to the bone. "They can manipulate matter at the subatomic level," one scientist explained, her voice trembling. "These weapons, they don't just destroy, they unmake." Dennis sat back, his mind racing. What's their objective? Why come here now? The pieces fell into place with terrifying clarity. The Terrium, Earth, if the Harbingers got their hands on it. Dennis stood, his face set with grim purpose. "We need to evacuate Earth, all of it." The room erupted in shocked protests, but Dennis silenced them with a raised hand. "We have no choice. If the Harbingers get the Terrium, it's over for all of us." As the massive evacuation effort began, Dennis assembled a core team of fighters. They would stay behind, buy time for the evacuation, and if necessary, ensure the Terrium never fell into enemy hands. From the command bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, Dennis watched as the last civilian transports lifted off. The sky was thick with ships, ferrying humanity to a new home among the stars. "This is it," Dennis said to his team. "Whatever happens, it's been an honor." The first Harbinger ships appeared on the horizon, their sleek forms distorting the very air around them. Dennis took a deep breath, steeling himself for the fight ahead.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.